Tuesday, September 4th.
Would
We'll
you-
call to order. I will call to order the Tuesday, September 14th, Public Works Committee meeting. We'll do a roll call.
Jenny Wook, City Council.
Bob Heim, City Council.
Jeff
Maureen
Langhelm,
Whitaker,
ahead.
Maureen Whitaker, staff.
Jeff Langhelm, Public Works Director, staff.
Bree Ellis, staff.
Mary Barber, Parks Commission.
Jim Franich, Council. All right. We need a approval for the minutes.
Move to approve the, let's see, I guess it would be the August.
Yeah, the August
2021
minutes. Excuse me. I meant the October meeting.
Okay,
I was looking at the wrong meeting.
It would be September 14th, wouldn't it be?
Yes.
September, I move to approve the September 14th meeting minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, we don't have any old business scheduled, so first item under new business is the Hall Street right-of-way vacation request. And that looks like Mr. Ryan White.
Yes, I'll be making the presentation. Mr. Ryan White, I believe, is on the phone as an attendee if we have questions. I believe that's his phone number.
Okay,
So some of you on council have seen these non-user statute for right-of-way vacations. Just a quick synopsis. Back prior to statehood, plats that were created included the need to place right-of-way between lots. And the way the state laws are written and the way they're written now, it essentially states that back then, if we didn't open up the right-of-way for use, then the half of the right-of-way along the frontage of a house or property was granted back to the property owner if not used. So it's a different classification of these in some areas of the city that were platted prior to statehood, and this is one of those areas. So we call it a non-user statute right-of-way vacation. It's outlined in code, it's outlined in state RCW that we either must use it for transportation purposes, or if we have existing utilities in there, then we can continue to use it, but just grant ourselves an easement and vacate it. But otherwise, the requirement is for the city to vacate this right-of-way. And I can bring up, if you'd like to see the map of the location of the site. I'm sorry, my screen flashed on me. Would you like to see that location on your screen that was provided in the packet?
Yeah, I
Yes.
would. I couldn't figure out where Hall was based on that aerial view that you showed. Must be
Okay.
hidden by trees.
No, there's no, that's part of the confusing part is there is no Hall Street. It was the original name provided in the plat itself back in before 1900. So that's not the name that's used today. But let me get to that here just a quick second. Okay, got too many screens open. Almost there.
Goes up the hill. Milton goes up the hill off of North Harbor View. Is that correct?
Yes, I'm going to actually bring it up on GIS first so we can zoom into it. But okay, here we go.
Okay, I get it now.
Okay, can you see my screen?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. So we have North Harbor View is here. We have Milton Avenue, what we call lower and upper Milton Avenue. The lower portion is accessed from North Harbor View Drive. Upper Milton is accessed from Bernhardson. So you have Milton Avenue and Goodman run parallel. And then this section of Benson Street, previously known as Hall Street, went through the plats all the way from what was the west side all the way to the water. So there's a section in here, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit, of unopened right-of-way. And I don't know if you can see the parcel lines, but there's a section of that. This is not a parcel in here. This is an open right-of-way. This person here has already vacated that section of Hall Street. This is Mr. White's house here.
Mhm.
And so the request is to vacate this section. It's a
Okay,
60.
that little gray section that goes around the corner there, is that a driveway or something, or?
It's a hammerhead turnaround because Milton Avenue is a
Ah.
dead end street.
Okay, okay,
So it's a hammerhead turnaround.
okay.
You have to be able to see through the vegetation, Bob.
Yep.
Alrighty.
And so now I'm going to stop sharing this and I'm going to share the packet that was provided. Where is it? There it is. Okay. So now hopefully you can see this is part of the packet that was provided with your agendas. That's Mr. White's property. And then this is the area that their surveyor had identified in the hatch as requesting vacation.
And the confusing part here is when you look at this piece of paper, the place that's going to be vacated is to the right of the property, but on the aerial view, it's on the top of the property.
Yes, thank you, Tony. The north arrow is to the right here, so it changes orientation. Yeah.
And
And so what after reviewing this, I've reviewed this with our wastewater superintendent and our public works superintendent, and they support vacation. And as you can see, there are no utilities located in this portion of right-of-way. The utilities are located in the north half of the 60-foot right-of-way for Hall Street, sanitary sewer and stormwater. So there's no issues here. And there's kind of an outline of the hammerhead turnaround here. But for maintenance purposes and site distance purposes, the city is requesting that we vacate all but a small triangle here. We haven't figured out exactly what that triangle is. I've spoken with Mr. White about this. He verbally hasn't been opposed to this. I've notified the surveyor, Gary Proctor, that we may be going down this path and would be letting him know if we need to remove a portion from the right-of-way vacation. And he's ready based on any comments we receive or support that we receive for this modification of the vacation request from the Public Works Committee.
So that area would be for what, signage and kind of a turning radius there in that corner?
It's just for us to be able to adequately maintain our right-of-way. It could be site distance. We could be maintaining that so that we could keep vegetation trimmed back. If we had to come along here and put a sidewalk in one day, we would want to be able to keep that as accessible to us instead of having to get rid of it today, vacate it today, and then buy it back later.
Okay.
so I'm assuming where the red kind of semicircular line you have there, that hammerhead ends right just a little bit above where your hand is.
It does. It ends. There's a solid line that outlines the edge of the asphalt for the hammerhead.
Okay.
Yeah, and I can bring it up on the aerial photo with a different image behind it that it doesn't have the shadows if you want to see better what the asphalt looks like through this area. If you want me to, I will do that.
If it's easy enough.
Yeah, let me just change the aerial view. Let me do that before I switch it over. There we go. Okay, okay, I'll switch the screen again. Okay, I've zoomed in. It's the same area we've been talking about with a different aerial photo. You can see the hammerhead now pretty clearly. Turn around. And the city is just requesting that we maintain a small triangular piece here of right of way so that we can continue to operate our hammerhead turnaround.
Yeah.
We don't ever see these two roadways, Goodman Avenue, Milton Avenue, connecting. There's quite a grade change between the two. It would be a very steep hill. And so,
Well, and you've
And-
also got half that right away from the property to the left that's already been taken. So you only got 30 feet
yeah.
left.
Yep. So again, as long as we can maintain any easements through here and maintain our hammerhead turnaround, staff is recommending that we proceed with vacation. So any comments, thoughts, direction, recommendation?
There's no intent ever to put a sidewalk in through there?
Well, there might be, but that's one of the reasons we're retaining some of the additional right of way that was outlined.
Okay.
That would be a steep sidewalk.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mayor, I'm sorry, Councilmember Hines, you meant sidewalk between Goodman Avenue and Milton Avenue?
Yep.
Oh, yeah, no, it would be too steep. It would not meet ADA compliance.
Okay.
Then I
Approximately,
would recommend that we vacate this property.
what is the approximate grade between Goodman and Hall?
Let me verify that here. I thought it was about 20 feet of elevation change, but let me verify it just a second.
Quite a bit.
Yeah. It's gonna take me a quick minute here. Takes a while for contours to load. Oh, it's actually 40 feet.
From the edge of the hammerhead over to that cul-de-sac?
Yeah, let me turn on,
Holy moly, that's
let me turn on the, I'll show you what I'm looking at here. So if you can see now, this is 58
Oh,
feet
wow.
here, and then you've got 100 feet here. So,
wow.
For the
It's
true
quite
cycling
steep.
enthusiast, yeah.
yeah, so no, I don't ever see us putting any sort of ADA path between those two roadways.
Not unless you got about 5 switchbacks in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I go along with this. It seems reasonable, particularly given that elevation change. There's nothing going through there now or in the future.
I would agree.
Okay. Well, then we will proceed. I will make those revisions, to request those to the surveyor to maintain a portion of the northeast corner of the right of way, and then we will proceed, once we get those revisions, we'll proceed to city council for final approval.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you for that, Jeff. Our second item is the pros plan update.
And thank you, Mr. White. We appreciate you being here.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Sure. Hello, Council. My name is Ben Coronado, Parks Commission Chair, and with me today I have members of the Parks Commission Pros Plan Subcommittee, Mary Barber, who serves as Vice Chair, and also Roger Henderson, who serves on the Commission. We're here today to update you in the sake of transparency on the progress of the 2022 Parks and Recreation Open Space Plan. To date, we have conducted a review of the parks inventory and assessment, also recently completing the survey of Gig Harbor residents and parks users that our consultant will describe here in a moment. We are very pleased with the results of the survey. We had an opportunity to review them just recently, and we'll be using the data as guides for writing the rest of our plan. Additionally, we are also in the midst of conducting 4 stakeholder group meetings, 2 of which have already occurred, and the other 2 will happen this week or next. Those comprise of individuals representing the park user groups, so we can dive more deeply into the needs and uses of those groups. Those user groups are identified as users 65 and older, families with young children, recreation sport users, and also a group comprised of people with a focus on history, arts, and conservation issues. The results of these groups and the outcomes will also be incorporated into the planning document. Stephen is here. He's the head of the consulting firm that the city has hired to help us to write this plan. Steve and his company, Conservation Techniques, are professionals at helping municipalities create long-range planning documents. Recently, they've done a number of cities, including Covington, Sequim, and also Penn Parks, one of our neighboring organizations. We've enjoyed working with Steve and taking advantage of his expertise and knowledge that comes with his company of the Northwest being based here. Steve's going to tell you more about the results of our mail and online surveys in a PowerPoint he's prepared and be ready to take some questions. Steve, I'll go ahead and hand it off to you.
Good afternoon, council members. Again, my name is Steve Dew with Conservation Techniques, and I will go ahead and share my screen and get this up for you. So bear with me one moment. And so if I could just see a head nod or two to make sure that you can see what I can see. Okay, great.
Yep.
Super. So yeah, as Ben noted, we are very pleased with the outcome of the recently completed survey for the Gig Harbor community. And what I've got here is a PowerPoint to basically hit a lot of the highlights from the data we collected. Just to start with just an overview of the process and methodology, the survey instrument, the set of questions, was designed with staff and with the subcommittee. It was fielded between mid-August and early September. It actually closed on the 11th of September. And it was a two-prong survey instrument in that we mailed out to a random sample of 2,500 households in Gig Harbor city limits. And we also had an online version that was open to anyone in the community to take advantage of, provide feedback on. The intent really is to broaden the amount of data we're collecting and use the mail survey as the random sample statistical valid survey and use the online community-wide survey as a bit of a truth check to the mail survey to see if there's any differences between that random sample of households versus the broader collection of community members who took the online survey. You can see on screen that we've collected a tremendous amount of data, 1,352 responses in just that 4 or 5 week period. So this is significant because that's a very big number, first off, and I think you should be proud of the energy that the community put into taking the time to take the survey. And secondly, with regard to the mail survey, we had 420 responses out of 2,500. So that's 17% response rate, which also is quite strong. Typically for a mail survey, you would see 8 to 10% response rate, but we're at 17%. So again, much higher than what would be normal in the industry. And that just, again, helped give us better base data for planning for Gig Harbor's future. For the online community-wide survey, a little over 900 responses came back. And also, to be clear, the data sets were kept separate. So the mail survey was a separate data set than the online community-wide data set. And that's important because it lets us really do deeper dive in the data to compare and contrast between the two data sets. And within the survey, we also asked 3 different demographic type questions about the household, whether there's kids under 18 in the household, age group of the respondent, and geography, where in the city is the respondent living. So that subset data also helps inform and give a finer granularity to the information that we're collecting through the survey. A couple things on just survey data and the information we've collected through this process. One is that in aggregate, the data for that 1,352 responses does fairly well represent the demographics of Gig Harbor based on census data. And I'll show you the subgroup data at the end of the presentation, but I just wanted to let you know up front that not only did we get a strong response, but that strong response is also a pretty good indicator of the community of Gig Harbor. So with that, I'm going to move forward into some of the data. So first off, there was a bit of a warm-up type question in the survey that basically asked how important is Parks and Recreation and the quality of life in Gig Harbor? Virtually everyone, 98%, say that Parks and Recreation are either essential or important in Gig Harbor for its quality of life. You can see in the pie chart, very, very slim pie sections for people who feel it's either useful and not important or not important. And again, this shows that Parks and Recreation are of value in the Gig Harbor community, and people are, I think, really interested in and care for parks and open space in Gig Harbor. And that interest carries through in how often people visit and utilize the different types of amenities that are in the Gig Harbor system. On this chart, you can see that trails, soft surface and hard surface trails, are at the top, as is waterfront parks, for the frequency for people's usage of the different amenities that exist in Gig Harbor. So core reasons for getting out and walking around parks or open space, waterfront and trails. And with regard to trails, that is also consistent with regional, state, and federal, or not federal, but national recreation trend data that shows that walking and hiking and trail usage is a top tier activity and facility type. So again, as we go through this data, I'll reference some consistency between the questions as well as, like I just did, with national or regional data. Other important things to note, playgrounds, viewpoints and vistas, community events are also very strong reasons for visiting parks and open spaces. We also asked the complementary question of, well, why don't you use them more often? So not having enough parking, not knowing what's offered, and then some limitations based on age or physical ability, sense of crowding, and not having enough restrooms were kind of the top 5 responses for what keeps people away. Some of those things can be pretty easily addressed, such as not knowing what's offered through additional communications, enhancements to the website, or other promotional materials. In terms of visitation, one question we had in the survey was fairly detailed in that there was interest in knowing how often people visit each of the different park and open spaces within Gig Harbor, and then how do they feel about the condition and the sense of maintenance for those facilities. So I've got 2 slides here. This is the first, because it's such a long list, I split it in 2. So you can see on the left-hand side, the have visited. So pretty high frequency of visitation for what you would think are the popular or bigger parks in Gig Harbor. This probably is no surprise to you, but it's good to have the base data. From older surveys, we didn't really have this level of detail, so it's good to know where people are going and how they feel about those parks, but also we'll get to know those sites that are less visited and can start to explore what can be done to enhance or improve those sites as we move through this process that might be able to bump up visitation and usage down the road. But with regard to the top tier parks that are most frequently visited, you can also see that they share a common feature, which is their care and condition is rated very highly. Typically in the 80+% range, that people feel that condition is either excellent or good. So that again shows that people are getting out, people are using, and they appreciate what they're seeing. And it's a reflection on maintenance staff that the care and upkeep of city facilities is so strong that it's coming through in these ratings. Moving to the second half of the list.
Hey, Steve, quick question.
Yes.
On the condition rating, both on the previous slide and on this slide, how come the percentages don't add up to 100?
Good question. And the reason for that is people self-selected how they wanted to respond. So it's a reflection of the number of responses. So this is kind of weighted on that right-hand column based on responses. So the longer the bar, the more responses there were. So if you didn't visit a site and didn't rate its quality or condition, there were fewer responses, if that makes sense.
Why wouldn't you just give us a percentage based upon the number of responses that we received?
I can go back and look at that data more deeply as a follow-up.
Yeah, I'd appreciate that.
Sure. But moving on, the sites that were slightly less visited, you can see on the list, typically were either smaller or kind of more neighborhood oriented sites, not like the waterfront properties with the exception of Veterans Memorial. But again, condition and condition ratings tend to decrease with frequency of visitation. So again, it's just interesting information. And again, as I note in the corner there, approximately 55% of respondents rate the condition of parks and open space as either good or excellent. So a majority of respondents feel that in general, the parks are well maintained and cared for.
When was this survey taken to? Because Veterans was just redone, so I know.
Like I said earlier, the survey was conducted between mid-August and early September.
Thank you.
Yep. A different question we had in there was what I frame it as a Goldilocks question: is the porridge too hot, too cold, or just right? So we provided a list of park amenities and asked people to say whether there's the right amount, too many, or not enough of each of the items that you see on screen. In terms of the items that people feel there's not enough of, really only a majority feel that there's a greater demand for waterfront or waterfront access areas and walking and biking trails. And you can see in the gradations in the chart that there's a pretty good balance between those who feel that you're providing enough and those who feel that you might need to provide more. And again, that's generally a good indication that you're on the right track. There's not major holes in the types of amenities or facilities that are provided. But again, as with waterfront opportunities and trail opportunities, it ties back to the top reasons why people are going out to parks and open space. So again, that internal consistency between the activity and the facility is showing through in the data. Respondents with children in their household feel that there are not enough of every item listed. And I can get into some more detail on the subgroup data a little bit later too.
So I have a suggestion. Could you, in your data, change the wording on developed parks with playgrounds to say playgrounds at developed parks? And the reason why, and this is the mayor, last night it was reported about this at the council meeting. And a council person, they just generalized, but they said, yeah, there's a survey that the public thinks that there's more than enough parks. And I was shocked to hear that. And someone that loves parks, they don't like to hear that. And now reading this is not what that person said at all. Because they said, most people surveyed that there were more than enough parks. Well, this is a big difference. Playgrounds that develop parks, there's more than enough. That's different, and when we're in the midst of thinking about, buying extra conservation land, I would not want to do what the public wouldn't want us to do. So it's just kind of how it's, so I would hope that maybe if we rephrase that just to say playgrounds that develop parks, maybe that won't be misinterpreted. It's the same thing. It's just, I'd hate to have someone interpret it the wrong way.
Fair point. And I hear what you're saying. And as far as the summary, I can change the summary to account for that. But this is a reflection of the actual wording from the survey, which is in the past already. So.
Okay.
So moving on, we had another question there that was a forced ranking question where we offered 6 items and asked people to rank them 1 to 6. And the intent here was to see if we can force that priority and then see how that priority shakes out across all of the data we collected. The numbers off to the far right, 1 through 3, represent that rank order, and they simply list in vertical order down. So maintaining existing parks and open space is the top #1 priority. And again, with regard to other surveys we've done and other data we've seen from across the state, anytime a question is asked to compare whether you want to maintain something that exists versus develop something new or do something else, maintaining what you have is almost always the primary. And it's almost always the option of choice because people know that they've already invested in it and want to see that it's maintained and cared for going forward. So that data also comes through in this survey, showing, again, a very strong percentage of people who feel that that is a top priority. Right after that, again, trails coming in, assuming that you know that maintenance is the top priority, you look to the next top priority as the first priority improvement. And again, trails is showing up here at the top of the list, again, consistent with the interest in walking, running, biking, and interest in having trail facilities, followed by installing new amenities at existing parks. So here again, residents or respondents with children rated developing new parks or adding amenities to existing parks as a higher priority compared to those without children in their home. So again, it ties back to the mayor's comment about playgrounds and that there is a latent demand for additional enhancement or development to accommodate usage by families with kids or kind of that middle-aged group.
Yeah, I'm assuming that the data that you're showing there is the aggregated data from the actual results, and where you have the note there on the bottom left, that is something that's you just gleaned from the respondents.
Yes, so the data that I'm showing through this PowerPoint is aggregate data for both data sets combined. Secondly, the notation to the bottom there with regard to the subgroup information is we look back at both the data sets, the mail survey and the online survey, look for anything that stands out as a significant difference in responses by all of the different subgroups for each of the questions. So we note that in the summary report, anytime we see a difference that stands out between subgroups, whether it's between households with or without kids or age groups. And generally we're calling out those things that are really just significantly different. So in this case, the households with kids under 18 had a higher percentage that was significant than those without kids for developing new parks and improving or expanding amenities. Is
that a slide that you can, or something you can prepare that shows that?
Yeah, I can dive deeper into the data after this session and provide that as a follow-up item.
Well, it'd be just providing a bunch of crosstabs.
Pardon me?
The concept is providing crosstabs. So what you do is you start taking some of the demographic data and you start showing how all those different demographics responded to questions. So it'd be people with kids, people without kids, certain income levels, certain ages and the like, and you can show how they were responding to each of the questions.
Yeah.
I have a question though. When I look at your ranking 1, 2, and 3, you've obviously taken just the number of people who said this is my number one priority. However, when you add in, or what would my second priority be? You could argue that combining with that develop current city-owned park property is actually the number 2. And the one that is number 3 stays 3, and the one that's 2 drops down to 4.
Yes, you could make that argument, and that assumes that you're not putting any additional weight on that first choice as having more importance than a second choice. So that is absolutely true, and that's a data massaging issue. So I kept it clean and just ranked based on first priority.
I completely understand. I just love this kind of stuff and playing around with the data.
Yep. All right, so moving on. Then we had a question about different types of park and recreation amenities. And the intent here was to ask people to look at a list of potential things and say whether they'd be supportive, somewhat supportive, not supportive of considering adding or expanding those into the Gig Harbor system. And again, ranking based on how strongly people support different amenities. Again, you can see at the top 2 trails, whether it's soft surface or paved. Again, you're seeing a consistency in the data responses between trails being a very important thing. Also, you're starting to see some of the more specialized or interesting sort of amenities, such as an outdoor splash pad, dog area, picnic, not picnic, but playground space, and picnic areas actually, as things that people would like to see more of. So again, tying back to the mayor's earlier comment, this data and the prior questions data go hand in hand with regard to, again, that age group and household demographic that has kids that want to utilize parks and open space for playgrounds. It's coming through in the data in a couple of different ways. There is consistent and strong support for trails across all of the different subgroups, whether it's age, geography, or household makeup. But there are a couple differences between age groups. So those households that were under 45 had slightly stronger support for playgrounds, bike skills, splash pads, skate parks, sport fields, and sport courts. Whereas those who were 45 to 64 were more inclined to be in support of more passive oriented things, such as opportunities for off-leash dog walking, picnic areas, and paved trails. And again, this level of detail is discussed in the summary report, and I can provide more detail in the breakdown by those subgroups if there's interest in that. Kind of getting close to the end here, we had a question in there that was kind of a willingness to pay style question. It had a very long intro that basically caveated that the city's not looking to do a tax increase. We're not looking to do major things, but hypothetically, given the types of amenities and interests the respondent has, would you be willing to support an additional amount for those things on a cost per month basis? So it was gradated options. So you can see in the scale there, it ranged from 0 up to 10 and more. So it was 6 different categories people could select. 78% of respondents were willing to pay $4 or more. So you can see in the bar chart how that splits out across the different cost options. And the subgroups of younger responses and also those with children in their household were generally more willing to pay more than others for the sorts of improvements that were noted in the survey. And again, there's no specific strategy to put a bond out or a levy or anything specific to that. It's just background information, just to see how the community feels about potentially financing improvements down the road if there is a question about that later.
I'd be really interested to see the demographic breakdown on that, particularly by age.
Sure.
And from that, we can glean who are likely voters in the event that the city wants to think about putting something out for the voters to approve.
Definitely. And I believe this is the last question I'm touching on. This was one about communication options. How do people want to be informed about parks, activities, events, things that are happening within the Gig Harbor Park and Recreation System? So people want to go to the city website to get information. So this is a question about preferred methods, not how they currently get it. So the preference is to go to the city website, and there's also a strong preference to access information via Facebook. But also kind of the old school options are still pretty strong in Gig Harbor. Community events, signs, posters, and direct mail are also quite strong. And again, for the Facebook group, it's really stronger for the age of 45 and under. There was a final question in the survey about, it was open-ended, so people could write in whatever they wanted. Basically, it was, if there was one improvement you'd like to see in the Gig Harbor Park and Recreation System, what would it be? I forgot how many we had in terms of total responses, but it was probably close to 800. So it was a lot to sift through. And what we did is basically thematically group and tabulate. So what you see on screen represents kind of those top tier themes that we saw in the written comments. So improving and being consistent with maintenance of existing facilities is important. Again, going back to that priority question of what's your top priority, maintain what you got. And then separately, a lot of folks wrote in about expanding and maintaining the trail system for both paved and paved and soft surface. And married with that, interest in extending Cushman Trail, but also adding some amenities along trails such as benches, trash cans, dog dispensers, signage, improving and expanding waterfront access, including improved kayak and boat access. And in terms of other recreation amenities, providing a pool. Again, it was open-ended, people could write in what they wanted. Also splash pad, off-leash areas, and then turfed or lighted fields. So that's the quick synopsis of the data.
Are those in any particular order, or is that just the 6 things that showed up the most?
They are in order based on frequency. Yes.
So it would seem, at the very beginning of the show, it seemed that most of the people were quite happy with the condition of our parks. But here we see at the very top here that improving maintenance of existing parks is the first bullet point. So it seems like it's a little counterintuitive.
Well, I can't speak to the why people write what they write, but when you give people the floor to write in what they want, it ends up with a wide variety of responses. And again, I can't speak to why maintenance came up so often, but I think it may be that there's just interest in continuity of maintenance. There were a handful of comments here or there about specific sites needing additional attention or management of invasive weeds or conservation-oriented management. But that all got lumped into this first bullet point.
Okay, well,
Steve.
as I say, the first few slides where it talked about the condition of the existing parks, They were all excellent or very, I mean, it was in the 70% or so range that people felt very satisfied with the conditions. And I don't know, it just seems a little bit odd.
Fair enough.
Steve, isn't this where the safety issues came up too, and aren't they grouped in the maintenance? There were some open-ended questions about safety in the parks and traffic safety, that type of thing.
I'd have to go back. This set of responses is specific to the one open-ended question on what's the one thing you would do. And some of those responses did include, personal safety sort of responses. But to the council member's comment, I would have to go back and look through the write-in comments to see if there's anything else that stood out in that makes those early questions more curious.
So in regards to that, Tulsa, so if this is truly in order, you're saying included lighted and turf sport fields was the least amount?
So again, this was a collection of, I think, 800 some written responses. And this is let's call it crude tally of responses based on themes that people wrote down. So, each one of these can represent kind of a larger bullet under them to define specifically what all of the responses are. But, it would probably be beneficial going forward for council members and the Park and Rec Commission, the full commission, to really take a deeper dive into those written comments to see what else can be gleaned from that data. Again, as an outside consultant, I only can know so much about the system and the city, but you as locals who represent the community have a much deeper understanding than I do, and probably can read into some of the comments a little differently than I can.
Okay, because what I would like somehow is some data as to like the online, how do we know that it was a person didn't duplicate it, 15 or 20 times, or was it a local person? And how did they find out about the online? And, a lot of the other things I think are normal, which make it sound good, but as far as accurate, but 2 or 3 years ago, we had 500 people in City Hall say that lighted sport turf fields were the most important thing. We had 3 that wanted a pool, and I know things change, but we just signed a deal with the Y to spend $8 million building fields. So we know that, we did a bigger study, and we know that, lacrosse teams, football teams, soccer teams, we spent 3 years doing an interlocal agreement with the YMCA to build these fields. So that was what we heard louder than anything else, not maintenance, but so that's why it makes me, I'm sure that hasn't changed because the fields haven't been built yet. So I'd be curious onto some of that. And I'm not saying your data is wrong, but this council knows that they just spent 4 years working with hundreds and 500 people to figure out what they wanted. And so it's hard to see, it's hard for me to understand that that's at the bottom of their list now.
And just to follow up on that, Mayor, I was thinking the same thing about the second or third slide. When things were being rated, sports fields did not have nearly the percentage of interest that I thought it would have based on what you just described, all the meetings that we had in the packed council chambers over the sports fields. So it's this is very, very interesting.
Yeah.
I noticed that same trend, and I think you can rationalize it pretty easily, called things that average mortals can do, and there are more of them than true athletes or kids or people with athletes, will probably win the discussion when it comes to voting. Okay, that is, there's more of them than there are the other version. The other thing that intrigued me was and I think Tony, I think you were on to it, was the if you broke this down by the various groups that you had and recreated some of those charts, okay, that you were showing in terms of preferences, and I would do it both demographically, you had it by age, I'd be interested in that. I'd also be interested, we used to take random data back in my prior life and take that data and then aggregate it into those groups, come up with a quote, mean or median rating for that group, and then put the groups back together, weighted by the actual number of people in Gig Harbor that fit that demographic. We used to do that all the time. And that way you can take a random sample and say, okay, instead of picking the people out by the demographic, you just took a random sample, but then take the random data and pull it back into, this is what it looks like weighted by those demographics within the city.
That would be normalizing the data.
Exactly.
And
Exactly. But that
the
gives
other
you a true picture, I think.
The other big
of-
question would be, you said you had a mail-in random sample, and then you had the online version that anybody could go into, and the mayor was alluding to this. I'd like to see what the data looks like when you just look at the mail survey. And that, because that allows you to do more of a statistical analysis and see if anything is within the, or what the, what is I'm looking for, the margin of error might be for some of these things. And I'm willing to bet you're going to get a different analysis if you just look at the mail survey and then compare that to just the online survey. And I bet it's skewed a little bit on the online survey.
Well, I actually do have some of the subgroup charts that I'll show in a moment, but I just want to get back to the mayor's earlier comment about sports field facilities. And, you know, again, I mentioned earlier that when we receive surveys, we don't know the why people respond the way they do. We just know what they responded. And to the point about sports fields and all of the city's efforts over the last many years to move forward on that big project, it might also be safe to say that some people who would have put sports at the top of their list previously now have moved on to the next thing because they know that that project is moving forward. So again, we don't know the whys, but all we can do is read and interpret the data.
And normally I would agree with you, but they're just not that in touch with our interlocal agreements if you actually study them.
I'll go back to my prior life here. There are a couple things. One, when we had the sports thing, we had people who had a vested interest in sports things responding to that, okay? Keep in mind, this wasn't a general, hey, what do you think about this, guys, okay, to the general population. This wasn't a random sample. As noted by many of them had their team jerseys on when they came and talked to us, okay? So number one, it was a very select sample we were looking at, okay? Who, like I said, had a vested interest in that particular item. I find that very interesting in this because this, to be quite honest, I think is more instructional to the city than it is, let's say, a public hearing, okay? Great example. Public hearing has people who have a vested interest in something to come on down to City Hall or sit through that hearing. They can fill out a survey a lot easier than they can do that. And by the way, they can fill out the survey and they don't have to be necessarily interested in any specific item on there. They can still fill it out. So I think you're getting actually a better picture of what's going on. And by the way, I would say most team efforts today, I know why they call them organized sports. Let me tell you, you get on Facebook or any other, and you know what's happening. And by the way, we've seen it on emails, the emails and Facebook. One post will come on there and then boom, this thing will explode because all their other Facebook friends are members of that team or that sport or whatever. So we're getting very, what I would call biased information when we get some of this stuff just from hearings or from written comments that come into us. This, I think, is a much more accurate way that represents what the people of Gig Harbor are interested in.
Absolutely.
And I want
Yes.
to remind everybody that what we did a few years ago was focused on a small area in Gig Harbor North.
Yeah,
This is focused on across city limits. What do you want to see?
Yeah.
So it makes sense to me that you get two different answers.
Yeah.
From
Yeah.
from even if you were to have those same group of people, because we're talking about two different areas, a small focused area versus
Yep.
across the entire city.
which takes me back to my prior comment on, if you want to look at the whole city, if we can weight those responses by particular demographic areas and then combine them into a total picture, you got it, I think.
So I did the online survey, and can you refresh my memory on the online survey? Did we give an address of where we lived?
No. And we had a map that had 3 different areas, A, B, and C. And then you could select which area you live in, and then you could check whether you don't live in the city. And if you don't, you had the option of providing a zip code or something like that.
And do we have any documentation on how many
How's
folks?
this?
Oh, thank you.
So yes, good segue. And like I mentioned, I do have some of the subgroup breakdowns just so you can see the differences between the online and the mail surveys. And the map here represents the map we used in the online survey and the mail survey. So in the mail survey, we had a stronger response from kind of that central and downtown area. We had 10%, 40 people out of 420 mail survey respondents self-identifying as not being in the city of Gig Harbor or being in some other area. So that's not a significant percentage. It's less than 10% of the total response, and the remaining response is still a statistic size sample. So we can certainly discount or weight the data differently for that. For the online survey, it was a much larger percentage of responses that were from outside the city. And again, these were kind of self-responses. So either people could not read the map clearly, couldn't say whether they were in or out of the city based on the lines and the roads, or they were strictly outside the city. Again, we don't know the whys. But it does show that there's a bit of a slant in the online survey to non-city residents.
Okay.
But what was interesting as we went through the subgroup data analysis is, for the most part, the online survey data for city residents didn't vary much with the non-city residents. So the out-of-city residents really were only interested in 2 areas that were somewhat different than the broader sample. Those 2 areas were interest in paved trails and interest in sport facilities. So that potentially ties back to the earlier conversation on where those sport players might be coming from if they're not coming from within the city.
Yeah.
Also on the age group breakdowns, here you can see mail survey and online survey. So the mail survey, as we also typically see this in other communities we work in, mail surveys tend to skew to older populations. Older people tend to like getting mail in the mail, and they actually return it. I'm in that group too, so that's good. I like to take surveys. But the online survey does skew younger, which is also consistent with what we see in other communities. One thing to note is that in aggregate, this data actually aligns pretty well with the breakdowns by age group for the city based on the US Census data. So it again, it aligns pretty well. And then the last one is households with or without children. So the mail survey, because they skew to older individuals, skews to households without kids. And then the online survey skews to households with kids. And again, in aggregate, when we look to combine this, there was actually a slight skew to households with children than the broader census data. And the male survey actually nailed it in terms of that percentage, because US Census shows 26% of households with children. The male survey shows 26% with households with children. So again, I think all in all, there's a really strong correlation in the sample to the population, which then shows that you've got some level of validity in the responses that we collected. And again, we can provide the data to dive deeper into those subgroup analyses, but just wanted to walk you through what those subgroups look like. And that's all I had for a presentation.
One other item that we haven't mentioned, on page 9, you had a breakout of what you're willing to pay per month, with ranging all the way from nothing to $10 or more per month, which I found extremely interesting. Kind of a wide distribution you had there. And this is one of the areas in terms of trying to prioritize projects based on, in many cases, limited resources. And just more food for thought, I guess, for the Parks Commission. But I took a median, or mean, actually it was a median, of about $5.50 per month. If you looked at all that data and said, what if you had to characterize it in a single number, what would it be? I took a wild stab at 550. And by the way, it's about 50% lie on the one side of that and 50% lie on the other side. So it's a median. But if you take that and then you multiply that by the number of households, I assume only one response per household was in this, or it could be assumed. It comes out that it's about $350,000 a year that you would get from that. And that's nothing more than the 550 times 5,300 dwelling units times 12 months. That's what you come out with. And then I took the capital costs and a wild guess at operating costs, and came out with some pretty big numbers that pale in comparison to $350,000. Okay. For example, the sports complex is probably going to run us probably $2 million, somewhere in that ballpark by the time we complete our chunk of it. The paddler's dock is another $2 million. The fisherman's dock is probably more like the $2 to $3 million. All the other minor projects, the Cushman Trail extension, I guess, some of those items, the volleyball courts, if we ever do them. But you look at that, and then you take the operating costs, which I took a wild guess at $1 to $2 million a year, and you take all that and add it up and divide it by $350,000, and it's going to take forever to hang on to break even. You can't break even on this deal, which means parks are city subsidized, period. They can't, you can't get it back with taxes, not with this type of data that says, hey, we're only willing to pay this much. So I think that's one item that I think the Parks Commission is going to have to analyze and grapple with somewhat. And basically what it's saying is we can't do everything. That's what I'm coming down to, and not without a heavy subsidy of basically general fund money. That's where it's going to come from. So with that, enough of that.
Thanks, Councilmember. Any other questions for Steve or?
Well, I unfortunately didn't have as much time as I would have liked to really go through what information was included in the packet. But I just, from what I did see, there's a lot of different synonyms used. There's language generally supportive, there's numerous, there's many. There just seemed to be a lot of different adjectives to kind of talk about the same thing. So I'm going to be, this week, I'm hopefully going to have a little bit more time to really dive into this. And I appreciate the exercise, and I think there could be some good information that comes out of this. But as Steve had mentioned, and it's data massaging. And this was, I thought some of these questions were, I like survey questions that are a little bit more black and white. And a lot of these questions that were in the survey seem to be a little bit more broad in nature. And that's how you can kind of come into some of this data massaging. And, I can see that all surveys or questionnaires, it's kind of the way you ask the question, or actually just the questions that you ask dictate a lot of the answers that you're going to get. So I plan on spending a lot of time looking at what was in our packet here. And I'm sure that I'll be able to reach out to staff or our consultant there in the future if I have any questions. But I really appreciate the time that the Parks Commission and that our consultant spent on this.
So thank you. So I would like to say that I really enjoyed taking the survey. I thought the questions were quite good, and I thought they were easy to answer. I am looking forward to seeing some of the questions come back as to the age groups. I think that the city administrator and the mayor wanted to see some questions with regards to age groups. I would like to see that as well. But I thought this was very valuable to our Parks Commission. I thought it was very valuable to the city. So thanks for all your hard work on this.
Yes, thank you. I think it really, it's very enlightening. And of course, I think what's indicated here, it just begs even more questions the deeper you get into it, called why, which brings me to one last point. We used to collect data like this all the time. And then to get the why, we would selectively pull in focus groups. That is, people who answered things in certain ways. Sometimes we'd pull those in and use the focus group to basically answer the why. You check the box. Here's the box you checked. Why did you check it that way? And by the way, it's a series of probing questions. Do you do anything like that, Steve?
So no, the short answer is no, but we do utilize the stakeholder discussions to try to dive deeper into certain interests and questions about how people use parks, facilities, trails, programs. And as Ben mentioned earlier, we've got those stakeholder discussions broken out kind of thematically based on age or interest area. But separately, I think Ben's also going to mention in some next steps that we'll be doing an online open house a little bit later in a few weeks, so we can potentially take this survey data and take some of that information and put it back out to the community and start to dive deeper into the next steps, the priorities, and the whys.
Okay.
Great.
Thank
Great.
you, Steve, too. I appreciate it.
I want to make sure we're all aware of the timeframes that we have, though, for the next steps, because that's very critical. We don't have the ability to dive much deeper and break into smaller subgroups to do more studies and come back to council next year and have deeper discussions about this into next year. Just a reminder, we need to submit something to RCO early next year. And as part of that, we need a draft we need to submit to the Department of Commerce, probably in either end of December or first part of January. So right now, and I don't know, Steve, if you want to go through the schedule, I know we've been emailing back and forth about it, or Ben, but I think we just need to summarize for the Public Works Committee what our schedule is, so we all have very clear understanding of where we're going.
I also, I agree in not not overdoing it and getting it, putting the information that we have just to get it in there. Because one thing the public doesn't realize is, okay, Crescent Creek Park is going to have an outreach plan for part of it. We have the sports complex that we've already worked on. We've got a playground right out here that's going to have a new merry-go-round next year. So my point is, a lot of what the public's, the Penn Met may build a pool. So the thing is, there's already a lot of wheels in motion of what the public's wanting, but they don't know because it takes years to build it. But we're already using that data to move forward on a lot of that.
The bottom line on this is I want to see the raw data. I want to see all the crosstabs. I'd like to see the online versus the mail-in survey. I mean, that just informs me a little bit better as to who is saying what. And I'm really curious to see if you took the online survey and you took out all of the people that identified as not being in a Gig Harbor, how would that change the results?
Yeah. So, and just touch on that a little bit. I mean, I think with the outside the survey or with outside the city limits, I mean, it more or less gives you a flavor of the community. You know, we do have a lot of, you know, self-identifying residents that responded, you know, with a lot of great data that we can pull out. So, but yeah, as a lot of people have already touched on, you know, kind of the steps going forward. You know, we're going to finish up our stakeholder groups. We have 2 more meetings to complete in that. And then in the following month, we're going to start on the open house, which kind of, you know, we can pull some of that why out, I think, in that, you know, in talking to the public and, you know, let them know where we're at.
I mean, and the main reason for me of wanting to take the non-Gig Harbor folks out and see what it looks like is, again, I'm just speculating. I'm not even speculating. I'm just saying, if this council ever wants to go to the voters and asking them to tax themselves, particularly with some sort of property tax vote, I want to know what the people who are actually going to pay that tax want to do. It's easy to say, I want this and I want that and I want this and I want that, when you aren't going to be paying for it.
Yeah. And I think, you know, we're unique in that, you know, with Penn Met being right next door to us and, you know, encompassing us, you know, it's like, I mean, our Gig Harbor residents not going to use the pool that they're building? No, they're going to use it, but they don't get taxed on it. So, you know, it's kind of a give and take, I think, between the two.
I get it.
So, I mean, just like I said, a flavor with the outside the city limit residents.
It's good information to know.
You're right. Absolutely. So yeah, once we complete the, you know, stakeholder groups and the open house, which is going to be done digitally because we're not yet meeting in person. So Steve has, you know, a process set in place to kind of host a digital open house. He's got a format for that. And so, you know, he like I said, he brings a lot of expertise of the area of the Northwest, being based here and having gone through this process multiple times. I think he said, what did you say, 12 times already this year you've helped municipalities go through this process. So, you know, he's well versed in the process and you know, brings a lot of expertise. We expect to finish the draft plan hopefully by the end of this year, and have something put in front of council to review and approve and get moved on to the Chamber of Commerce and the state. And yeah, I appreciate everyone's time in the matter. We've put a lot of time into this, and you know, Parks Commission has had a heavy hand in this. And
then I think you meant the Department of Commerce and not the Chamber of Commerce.
Correct. Yes. Sorry. Much different. You know, and you know, I without a parks manager, this, you know, we've had a lot of help from Jeff and, you know, Tara Garrison with the Public Works.
Yes,
so I
both of you.
I really want you to recognize that this has been done without a parks manager, and you know, a lot of time has gone into this.
Well, let me just say for the folks here from the Parks Commission that we have 3 finalists that we're interviewing, and I have those interviews set up for 2 this Friday and 1 the following Friday. So we're getting there.
It's great to hear. Yes. Steve, you want to go into more detail about where we're at on the schedule? I touched on some of the things, but I know you said we're kind of got that hard end, and there's a little gray area with.
So I think you hit the highlights, and one thing to keep in mind is that the Recreation and Conservation Office, RCO, has a deadline of March 1 for submittals from jurisdictions for parks and open space plans. They are somewhat lenient with that. If you can demonstrate that you have like a 95% plan and you just have to schedule one more council meeting just to get it over the finish line. So our goal is to meet the March 1 deadline, but in the event, we need to slide it a little bit based on Park and Recreation Commission and or City Council discussions. We do have a little bit of flexibility with that, but otherwise, I think Ben's covered most of what needs to be covered.
Great.
Cool, thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Thank you.
All right. We'll move on to new business item number 3, which is a stormwater rate structure discussion.
Thank you. As you know, the city's consultant and city staff have been working to move the stormwater utility revenue study forward. We were at council in a study session in June, got some direction from council at that point. We've gone through a couple iterations of draft code revisions. We've had 2 open houses with the public and posted the presentation to Facebook and city's website. So we're getting the word out on what we're doing. We're getting some questions back and forth from members of the public. And we are now at a point where we are ready to present to the Public Works Committee the draft code revisions. And so that was provided in your packet. I want to say that some of the key takeaways from our open house were that the public did want to hear. There was a little confusion. Some of them thought we were actually changing utility rates, and hopefully we've answered that we're not looking to change utility rates themselves, not the monthly rate or the general facilities charge to this. But we wanted to make sure that we were very clear on how we, the city, were fitting in with everybody else. The council had asked that back in June. And so we want to make sure that it's very clear that what we're doing, what we're proposing, how we're moving forward is nothing short of what others are doing. And so I just wanted to bring up as part of the, sorry, let me get my screens fixed here. Okay, so I'm going to bring up the slide that was used as part of the presentation that shows, hopefully you can see my screen now. This is just a quick synopsis of municipalities in Western Washington and whether or not we are talking about private discounts discounts for private stormwater facilities and what they're being charged. So I'm going to refer to this later, but I just want you to know that this exists. This was not included in your packet, but this exists.
That would have been nice to have.
Well, it was included, and I apologize. There was a recommendation that all of the Public Works Committee members review the online open house. I'm not sure how many of you actually reviewed the online open house
I didn't.
presentation. Okay. So we'll send this out to you. Apologize that you weren't able to see this, but I'm going to refer back to this. But that would be something else that we recommend as we proceed forward, to review the video from the open house that was generated, where the staff made a full presentation. So unless go ahead.
Well, and I don't want to get you too sidetracked in the middle of are you in the middle of a thought?
I am, but go ahead and ask your question.
Well, just looking at that chart, was that the correct? Is Lakewood only charged $3.97?
That's my understanding. Yes, yeah, well, that's my understanding. This was a combined effort between Ashley Emery and city staff to put this together. We can verify that and find out exactly what size that was. Again, there's not much information on the Lakewood. It doesn't say what the if there's a discount or if it's how many square feet that encompasses.
Hey, Jeff, the numbers for Gig Harbor, is that what is proposed?
That's existing today.
So 1492 per 2,000 square feet.
Correct.
I thought that we were charging every parcel in the city the exact same thing.
No, we're not. The let me back up out of here. So the city stormwater code is chapter 1410 of the municipal code. That stormwater code, as it reads today, charges every single family residential lot 1 EBU. This definition of an EBU and almost all of the stormwater code that I referred to, 1410, was created in 1984 before we have had a stormwater manual by which developers have to design to. So when the stormwater code was created, it made some general assumptions. Part of those general assumptions were that an average house is 2,200 square foot of impervious area. The reality of the situation is that many houses are bigger than that. Many have more impervious area than that. And that the stormwater commercial facilities were then charged based on that ratio of 2,200 square foot of impervious areas. And then as the city developed, stormwater codes developed, there was a requirement that you have to have a detention facility included as part of your site development. So that requirement to have a detention facility was a stormwater manual requirement, came out much later than 1984. Exactly when, I'm not sure. It could have been 1996 or later. And so the city then implemented a discount and said, hey, as an incentive for putting in these detention facilities, we'll give you a discount by only requiring you to pay 1 EBU worth of stormwater rates in lieu of just undetained flows coming off your site. And so that provided an incentive for some developers to install stormwater facilities that require detention. And that incentive was there because the city started to get more and more of its infrastructure filled with stormwater runoff. And so there was an incentive for that. As development requirements progressed, and we started to get more and more involvement through our NPDS stormwater permit, through the Department of Ecology, through EPA, the city, all of these requirements became mandatory. And we're at a point now where we have to have stormwater requirements from our manual that not only that everybody has to detain, and not only that, but now the standard is everybody should be infiltrating, not even detaining. And so we also have many stormwater requirements that we have to pay for that have nothing to do with flows. So we are looking at stormwater requirements and having to manage our stormwater utility in a much different way. So we are sitting here with an issue in front of us that not only has an inequity in that you've got our large developers who have a significant amount of hard surface area. Currently, we refer to it as impervious area, but we have a significant amount of hard surface area that has a correlation to the number of EBUs that are being, number of EBUs that are being divided by the parcel. But even when you take in the amount of hard surface area, you are only paying for what is equivalent to one single family residential unit.
Going back to Tony's question, I was under the assumption I haven't looked at my utility bill lately. I thought that it was, other than the general facilities charge, which is a separate, I thought that we're paying, according on page 2, $14.92 for stormwater per month.
That's true. In each
Regardless of the square foot, however big, if I've got a 2,000 square foot house and the guy next to me has a 500 square foot house, right now, everybody pays $14.92. Is that correct?
For a single family residential unit, that's correct.
Okay.
But, and again, maybe I should have just made the entire presentation for the open house, because this is what we went through. I'm sorry that this wasn't viewed, but the developers, or the commercial developments don't pay that. They pay, but it's all across the board. You might have some commercial developments that's annexed into the city of Gig Harbor that continue to pay for, on one parcel, it'll be based off of the number of essentially the square footage of hard surface. And you'll have another commercial development across the street that redeveloped, and they're paying only 1 EBU or 2 EBUs. And so there's an inequity there. So what we have done is we have tried to bring forth a set of a code, which I hope that you saw as part of your packet, that will make a more neutral playing field for all developed properties, and it will go back to more of where we were previously and where we're trying to go again, which is strictly based off of the amount of hard surface area is how you will be charged your stormwater revenues.
So what was included in my packet was chapter 14.10, stormwater billing and collection. It was 3 pages.
Yes, that's the new set of code, and I have that in the background. I was ready to go through that as part of my presentation today.
So question, is that okay? Or are you in the middle of?
No, go ahead.
Okay. So first thing, it seems fairly, I didn't see the top sheet long enough, but it seemed very much in line with many other cities, like Bremerton was $18 or so, 19. And a lot of other cities our side are similar. So that was good to know. I do, Long Acres, I believe Long Acres is on Reed Road. It's a development, it's in our UGA, and they pay like 1.5 times the amount. So that $14.92 is not people that are hooked up to city sewer, but in our UGA. Is that correct?
Well, they only pay 1.5 times for their sewer fee, not their stormwater fee. We cannot collect a stormwater fee from anyone outside of our city limits.
Okay, all right. So I'm sorry, I'm getting confused with, right.
Yeah, a different utility, yeah.
Yeah, 2 months from now discussion.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess I feel like I've created some confusion here. So let me back up a little bit and just let me start off by going through the stormwater code, because that might help review or provide an insight on where we're going with the stormwater revenues.
And when this whole matter came up in June, I thought that we were, mainly focused on some perceived inequities from commercial developments. Now, is this a broader, are we talking about residential stormwater potential changes as well?
We're talking about not for single family residential units. No, we're not.
Okay, all right,
No,
thank you.
It's only for multifamily and for commercial.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to bring up Stormwater Code. So this is the section of code that was provided as part of your packet. We have taken what is in the code today, we've set that aside, and we're right now recommending that that whole chapter 1410 as it exists today be repealed and replaced with what you see before you. Because we started to take chapter 1410 and do a bunch of strikeout and revisions, and it became very confusing on what was kept, what was what would be kept, and what would be removed, and what would be added. So it's
Could
cleanest.
you move that over to the right a little bit, Jeff, please?
No, I can't.
Can I slide it somehow? Bob, do you see in the whole page, or you just seen part of the page?
You're muted, Bob.
So I'm seeing the whole page.
I'm seeing the whole page.
Okay, I must have to adjust something on my computer. Okay, thank you. I'm sorry.
Yep. So what I've done here is I've gone through and I've highlighted the areas that have generally seen the biggest change, so that we can focus on those going forward. And so if it's not highlighted, it might be changed slightly, but it's not the primary changes that we're talking about. So we have redefined what it means to be a developed property. There was a very lengthy definition put back in 1984, what it means to be developed. And we saw that and we said, well, that's overwhelming and confusing. So we're focusing on only having hard surface be our primary focus for whether or not a property is developed, is if it has hard surface on it. So that's a simple definition. A site will be developed if it has hard surfaces placed on it. And then the next key is the equivalent billing unit. It currently reads 2,200 square feet, as we showed earlier. Because our single family residential sites are much larger than 2,200 square feet of hard surface areas today, we're recommending we use the number 4,400 square feet for an equivalent billing unit. And then we've defined what a hard surface is. It used to be impervious areas, but impervious areas, while they might still, we still have impervious areas, we are more focused on hard surface areas because of the requirement for pervious pavements. Pervious pavements, gravels, compact gravels are hard surfaces, but they may not be necessarily impervious surfaces. So we went to a more general term of hard surfaces. And then we went down and we focused on single family dwelling. And you can see what it says here. And then I'm going to jump down to undeveloped. Undeveloped is strictly something that's not considered developed. So there's no hard surface. And then we redefined what our utility means. And we're going based off of what the city's permit says. So that was just a clarification to be consistent with our stormwater permit.
So if I went to the existing code book and looked up chapter 1410, it would read differently than this memo that we're looking at.
It would, yes.
Okay.
Significantly. And again, we have the original document that shows the track changes, but it would be very hard to read because so much it would be strikeout or underline. There'd be gaps that would be very hard to read from. So that's the reason we didn't show it in strikeout and underline. We would.
Well, that's what was kind of throwing me off about on this whole thing is but I'm following you now, so.
Okay. So then we went on to policy on rates and charges. We drastically revised this, and this is a key point here. So I might read this out loud just so we are all very clear on it. So sections A and B are new. We struck everything else out and created this. Each single family dwelling, each accessory dwelling unit, each residential unit of a duplex, and each mobile home or manufactured home is one equivalent billing unit for each parcel of developed property. And then it says, for all other developed real properties, the utility shall determine the number of equivalent billing units contained on each parcel based on the amount of hard surface on each parcel as defined in the definitions above. And then we just clarified that these are the kinds of things that were not previously included. And so we just had to work off of previous policies and known approaches that the city had taken, but we put it in code now. Regardless of the calculation of hard surfaces, a minimum of 1 EBU shall be determined. Calculations that result in more than 1 EBU shall be adjusted to the nearest 0.1 EBU. That's the way we treated everybody, but we didn't have it published in code. So what this B means is that if you are not an EBU, or sorry, if you're not a single family dwelling unit or accessory dwelling unit or residential unit of a duplex or manufactured home, we're going to charge you based off of 1 EBU per 4,400 square feet. And that's it. It's very clear. It's very concise. There's no discounts that are currently allowed in the current Stormwater Code. I'm going to keep scrolling because most of this hasn't changed. These are the exact same rates that you see today. We didn't change these rates, so there's no changes there. We did consolidate it because it had 2 different schedules, but that was based on whether it's a duplex or triplex or whatever and commercial. But since we're eliminating that, then we're just consolidating it down to 1 of the same schedules. And then I'm going to keep going because we really didn't change much. There's something that's key here that I want to point out, though, which is 1410.060, property exempt from monthly rates and general facilities charges. We didn't change this. We're keeping this the same. City streets and right-of-ways and state of Washington Pierce County highway right-of-ways are continuing to be exempt from monthly rates. That's it. That's the only exemptions. Now, what it doesn't say is city property outside the right-of-way, street right-of-way. We, the city, pay for stormwater charges on all of our properties, whether that's here at City Hall, out at the Operations Center, at city parks, at the treatment plant. We paid our stormwater fees, and we're not proposing to change that. And then lastly, this is a clarification for billing purposes, commencement or termination of stormwater monthly rates, A and B here. That's just a clarification, again, that we didn't have in our previous code.
So I'm looking in the existing 1410, and it talks about duplexes being charged 1.5 for the 2 units.
Right.
And your proposal was to go to 1 per unit or 1 per duplex?
1 EBU per residential unit of a duplex. So a duplex would be 2 EBUs.
So it would go up from 1.5 to 2.
Correct.
All right.
Yeah. So, I mean, I spent the first 15 minutes here explaining some of these things, and maybe I just should have started with the code. But it's a very simplistic view of what we're doing to change how we are charging property owners in the city of Gig Harbor. And that's mostly outlined here in 1410.020.
And you're eliminating any discounts, correct?
We're eliminating any discounts. Yep.
Well, so excuse me for my ignorance, but how does this address the, back in June, we kept using, I heard mentioned several times that Costco's paying 1 EBU and a single family house and the development across the street's paying 1 EBU. So how does that all play into this discussion?
Okay, let me see if I can zoom in and bring this in here. Okay, I have the map that was used open in my background that I'm going to show on my screen here in just a second. This map is what was used in the open house presentations that Mike Simmons and Bree created, a story map. When you look at the open house presentation, you'll see Mike walk us through this map. And I'm going to show it to you now, and you can kind of see, hopefully it will answer your question, Councilmember Franich, see what the differences are. Yeah, go
I
ahead.
don't mean, I don't not, it's 4:42, so I don't want, if Councilmember Wook and Councilmember Himes aren't, if you already looked at the presentation and you are clear on the question I just asked, then I can go on and review it myself and then have a follow-up, because I don't want to waste everybody's time just on my behalf.
I'm not clear on it. I assumed the way we were heading it was going to be based on square footage of like parking facilities plus building. Those were hard surfaces. That's it.
The 4,400 square feet, right?
Yes, based on per 4,400 square feet.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the question, well, I got a bunch of questions. The 4,400 square feet, we've doubled this thing. Does that mean that their rate doubles from where it was before? Or
No, it doesn't.
No. Okay.
No.
It's a deal called, where,
And
hey,
you make up the revenue by having the commercial properties starting to pay their fair share.
okay.
Right.
That's what I assumed we were doing here.
Right.
Okay.
Or
So,
I think that was your point earlier, Jim, where we started was the commercial part being, hey, they're not paying their fair share. Okay, that's our understanding. Like the example you gave there, that 1 building unit or 2 building units or whatever it was. But yeah, I'm still a little fuzzy. I guess it's my own problem here on going forward with this. Well, let me be real blunt. Who did we hurt here other than potential commercial customers? Are they the only ones that are going to be negatively impacted by this?
Well, just so you know, I had a discussion today with some developers that were asking, to maybe acquire some land from them and to get a feel for them. And their first reaction was the ERU, the fees that the city charges developers are extremely high. And now I know how to approach the subject tomorrow, but we have a lot of high fees. So I think we have to be watchful of that. We have to be watchful of that too. We can't have that attitude. We may want to watch our development, but that's not the way to do it.
If we justify, aren't these fees justified?
but yes, they are justified, and most jurisdictions don't provide the kind of discounts that we currently provide. These developers. And so let me show this example that Councilmember Franich is asking for. Again, it's something that Mike showed as part of his presentation. Okay, hopefully you can see my screen now.
Yep.
Okay, so I'm going to zoom into an area of Gig Harbor North that we're all very familiar with. Oops.
Brian Stowe? No.
No. So here we have Costco. Sorry, let me see if I can, here we go. Mike's the skilled person at using this. So Costco, there's one parcel. They have a site of 17.5 acres, hard surface 12.6 acres. They have 72% hard surface. They pay 1 EBU.
Do they have detention on site, and how much stormwater are they putting into our system?
They don't have detention on site. They have it further away. There's a maintenance association a group of property owners that works together to maintain a stormwater facility for this system.
But they are discharging into our system through their detention pond. It's not retention and it's not infiltration.
Correct. They are discharging into our system. Yep.
Right, and I do have to remember, you did bring this to my attention that they're paying one for a massive amount, and when I was concerned of the phasing that, or how much this was going to cost, you let me know, and Tony did too, that they have to pay. They're not getting this kind of break in almost every other city.
Correct. And so now I'm going to go up here and we'll look at the ridge at Gig Harbor. There's 122 parcels in the ridge. Site area, 19.4 acres, about equivalent to Costco. Percent hard surface, 37%, significantly less. EBU multipliers, 122. So this area of 19 acres pays 122 EBUs. Costco pays 1, and they're almost the same area. There's an inequity across the city like this. And if I was to go south, which here, let me do, I'm going to pause sharing so you don't have to watch me scroll. But it's the same thing at the other end of town. Only the annexed area that hasn't redeveloped.
I think you've made your point there,
Yeah,
Jeff.
yeah, I take my
Okay.
comment back. Yep.
Okay. Well,
Okay, so we are, and I want to back up to one thing. I mean, we keep talking about hard surfaces, and we need to be able to make sure that we have developers paying their share. We've had some comments made. Well, I have detention, so I still want a discount because I have detention, whether that's a rain barrel at my house or whether that's a storm facility on my site as a commercial site. And okay, that the point of the stormwater utility isn't to manage stormwater runoff that comes off of private developers. That's the property owner's responsibility. That's not the city's responsibility. The city's responsibility is to be in compliance with our NPDES permit and manage stormwater runoff for the city as a whole, not for each individual property owner. And so because of that, we created this slide also, which I'm going to share.
And again, Jeff, the point I was making with Costco is while they may have a detention facility that they feed into, that detention facility also dumps into our storm system.
Yes, and we have to manage the detention facility that it discharges into. They have to operate it and keep it clean, but we have to monitor it and make sure it falls within our NPDES stormwater permit. So so regardless of how much flow they discharge to our system, even if that flow doesn't negatively impact our system, we still have to manage our utility. And that's where I'm going with this.
well, that is where I may, I mean, I think this is a lot more complicated issue than just at first blush that, we just start talking about, these 3 pages. I mean, I really think that these charges should be based on the actual impact to the stormwater facilities. And if somebody has a very robust stormwater system that is discharging in the end, if they're discharging nothing or a very small amount of runoff into our stormwater piping system, then I think they should be paying less than somebody that has a less robust stormwater system that's putting more stormwater into our system, causing us problems.
Well, let me respond to that. The amount that, and this is the slide I want to share with you, the amount that we have to pay to operate our stormwater utility has very little to do with how much flow comes off of a site. Now, if Gig Harbor was completely undeveloped, we wouldn't have a stormwater utility that we had to maintain. But you can see these are our stormwater operating expenses. This is what we have to pay for through our stormwater revenues. We have to pay for our public works, and these are numbers from Ashley Emery. These are not numbers that I pulled together. These are Ashley Emery's numbers. Our general administration, our billing, our street maintenance, our inspections, which a lot of that is Bree, but so is admin, public works. And so here we've got $1 million a year that we need to pay for. And that $1 million a year has nothing to do with how much flow comes off of somebody's site. It strictly has to do with we have to manage and operate based off of how developed a site is. And so at some point, if we were to fully be low impact development, there would be no flow coming off of somebody's site. And therefore, would that mean if we're going down the path of we charge people based on how much flow comes off their site, if everybody has low impact development and no flow comes off a site, we don't have any stormwater revenues. And so if we don't have any stormwater revenues, how do we pay for the utility and the permits that we have to manage? We couldn't.
Well, so that said 985,000, just call it $1 million.
Yeah.
So if you took all of the developed parcels in the city limits and you did the math on the division, what would that come out to?
Let's just say it's 5,000. I'll do that. Let's just say it's 5,000 developed parcels, just roughly. Of course, my calculator's not working.
I think it's 20.
Yeah, it should be. Yeah. 200.
200.
Yeah.
Well, then how are we?
No, I'm sorry. That's sorry. It's 20. Yeah.
Okay, so right now we're operating at a deficit because we're only charging $14.97.
Yeah, but we have some, and I didn't show you the other map, the whole map, but we have other property owners. Harbor Plaza, they pay 400 EBUs worth of stormwater fees per month.
248.
448. Thank you.
That's the up in the west side, that came in annexed in.
That annexed in, yeah. So there's an inequity right there. The people across the street from them, Safeway, pays like 4 EBUs.
How many?
4 or 5, I forget. Maybe Bree has that number. It's minimal because they redeveloped. They both have stormwater ponds. One of them that was built under our requirements, one of them was built under the county requirements.
Well,
and so and maybe you're right, Councilmember Franich, we need to come back, digest this and come back to the Public Works Committee. But what we're trying to say is we have to be able to collect a stormwater revenue to pay for our required stormwater costs. And we're trying to figure out the best way to do that is not confusing. We could go down and we could start to dig into the minutia of how much it costs us to have each individual property, how much, whatever the number is, whether that's impervious area, hard surface area, flows, but then we're going to get into how much staff do we need to hire to manage that, and how much do we have to do in billing. There's a lot that goes on in the back in billing that every time we break into a new category, then we have to add more steps it takes to manage those utility bills on a monthly basis, bi-monthly basis.
So this will balance the budget, so to speak, in terms of revenue and cost, or we're still in the hole even with this?
It will bring us into a point where we don't have to immediately start raising stormwater rates for single-family residential units.
Okay.
And that's a good idea, not to
That's-
raise it there, but to make those that are more developed to pay their fair share and to make it more equitable among the developments as well. So this is a good idea. Seems to me simple, and the cost to the city to operate it seems to be the best way to do it.
Well,
Yeah, I think the idea that we're working at a deficit situation here, revenue versus cost, okay, is a key point. I think the disparity in even amongst existing commercial facilities, I think is humongous, okay?
Mhm.
Rather than turning this into a residential versus commercial war, okay? Called, hey, we have inequities within commercial developments, okay, that we would like to rectify. And by the way, in the name of fairness, and in creating a fair system, we balance our books on this deal in terms of revenue versus cost.
Yeah.
I think that's defendable, I think.
But one number that we're not talking about when I brought up this $1 million, we're not talking about the $1,700 GFC. So, you know, there's been a lot of money. Anytime a parcel gets developed, you know, residential, commercial, whatever it is, there's $1,700 going into the kitty on that.
That's for capital, not for operating.
And ongoing, well, isn't a GFC supposed to, I mean, when we adjust our rates, our general facilities charges, part of that goes towards the cost of the infrastructure.
Yes, for capital improvements on the infrastructure, not for daily maintenance of our infrastructure.
And do you have a breakdown of proposed capital project costs for improving the stormwater?
Well, it's in our
pipes?
stormwater comprehensive plan, but as far as whether or not we're going to change the rates on that, no, that's the next steps in the process that we'll bring Ashley in to have those discussions later in next year. We were trying to get those completed this year, but we're not going to be able to.
So more than likely, if there's a need to upgrade the infrastructure for the stormwater system, the GFC is going to go up.
Correct. Yes, but that's for new development only, not for monthly ratepayers.
I understand that.
Okay.
Well, I don't know. I guess I'm going to need to go back and look at that presentation. Maybe that'll answer a lot of the questions. But to me, I just, for some reason in my mind, I just keep going back to, I understand there's some inequities going on, and we should do something about that. But I think there needs to be a correlation between the impact to the stormwater fund and what people pay.
Okay.
So
Well,
maybe some of those.
What I was going to suggest is, obviously, there's still some questions. There's more that we need to do to help educate council. I don't want to bring this to council until we probably have had a study session on this topic.
That'd be worthwhile. But the other question is, are any of these inequities spelled out in legal documents? Like development agreements and stuff like that?
No, development agreements won't allow you to set or change, defray, or stray from code requirements for utility charges.
Okay.
So we can change it and it doesn't, okay,
Yeah.
got it. Thank
Yeah,
you.
it won't, we can change the stormwater utility rates and the structure of how we charge those, and it's not going to be superseded by a development agreement, if that's what you're
Great.
asking.
Okay, so there's no legal jeopardy here in altering
No.
rates? Okay.
No.
Great.
How long is the presentation and the work studies, the workshop, Jeff?
30 minutes, Mo, Bree, do you recall? It's about 30 minutes. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm looking back here, and I was trying to do this just myself here, and obviously I wasn't as clear as I could have been. So I apologize for that. Mike and Bree gave the majority, as you'll see when you watch that presentation, they gave a majority of it. And so I was trying to just move forward as if assuming you had seen it, but that's my fault for just assuming that.
And Jeff, I'll take a look at those, and then I want to talk to you a little bit about how we might be able to refine this a bit.
Okay.
And where is the link for that workshop, Jeff? Is it easy to find?
Mo, would you mind emailing it out to everybody? I think it's on the it's on the city's webpage. Is it easy to find? We have a webpage for the stormwater rate study, and it's under there, I'm pretty sure.
Well, if it's not too much work for Maureen or Bree just to send that link out to my email, that would be great.
I would appreciate it as well.
And I also.
Send it to everybody.
Send it to everybody.
Okay.
Well, I think that we're on the right path by having the discussion. I think until I see that just in the back of my mind, I'm thinking that, and maybe I'm the odd man out, but I'm thinking this is a little bit more complicated than to make this truly equitable than it just seems on 3 pages, but I could be wrong.
Okay.
So does anybody else have any more questions about new business item number 3?
Nope.
Okay, then we will quickly, hopefully since it's 5:02, we'll have a quick capital improvement plan update.
Sure, I'll share my screen. I think all of you received the updated CIP schedules as part
Yeah,
of
I'm
the
going to
packet.
say goodbye to all of you. So.
Okay.
And I'm just going to focus on the tier 1. Not a lot has changed. Again, these were highlighted to show the items that have been changed from the previous month's schedules. So as you can see, not a whole lot has changed. So I'm just going to flip through here until we see the first change. Public Works Operations Center, that was extended out a little bit. We thought we'd be through with design and permitting, I think, in October, and it's going to be November. We're still on track to be out to bid, hopefully, in early next year, and breaking ground in spring and being through with construction by fall.
Yay.
Yeah. 38th Avenue Improvement Project, we extended the construction on that because we have a delay in obtaining the street light poles and the metal use for the guard railing. So that's unfortunate and frustrating, but delay in materials has cost us more time. I think we have now pushed this out a total of 2 months from where we originally thought. And then lift station 6 replacement and lift station 12 replacement, both of those have been extended into next year originally we thought we were going to be done with lift station 6 in early spring, and now it's turning into summer. And this actually isn't consistent actually with what I just heard from Trent today. I think this was July for lift station 6 and August for lift station 12, but pretty close.
Is 6 Ryan Street?
It is, sorry, 6 is Ryan Street, yes.
12 is Woodhill.
12 is Woodhill, yes.
What's the problem on Ryan?
Just trying to get everything queued up and ready to go. It's just taking we had hoped the contractor would be out there already, and now it's the end of October. Well, it'll be the end of October.
Was there a working days? And I don't have it in front of me. What does that say for work? I mean, we're not extending. Are we extending the working days for that guy?
No, we're not.
Okay.
No.
Thank you.
Are we ready to talk about Murphy's Landing?
Yes, let me just finish. This is the last page, Councilman.
Okay.
Wu. So I'll back up one quick second. So Murphy's Landing navigation, that's starting here on 83. Design permitting was pushed out a little bit. So maybe now's a good time. Did you have a question specifically about this?
I did. I read somewhere that there was a meeting on October 1st with folks at Murphy's Landing, and I don't know the outcome of that meeting.
I think that Murphy's Landing Marina was pretty satisfied with the response the city gave them. That Murphy's Landing and the city, for those of you who haven't been involved in this, we all know that actually we entered into an agreement for the city to design and permit the dredging and for Murphy's Landing to complete the dredging operation itself and contract for that. We signed the agreement, and then Murphy's Landing came to the city and said, hey, we have a larger area that we think needs to be dredged. Some of it may be because of the issue at hand, some of it may not be, but we want to be able to expand the scope of the project so it's not just this one small area right at the very end of what they have is essentially an underwater wall. And we said, okay, we met with them on October 1st. It was Trent Ward, myself, Marcos McGraw, and we said, just to be clear, the circular area that we identified as the area of impact may not be scaled. They thought it was scaled precisely, that we were only going to look at a 30-foot diameter area. We said, no, it's just this general area. Maybe it's 40 feet. We haven't done an underwater sounding sonar survey, topographic survey to know exactly how large the area of impact is. We were all just pointing to it and saying, it's about this area. So we said, we, as part of this agreement, will be taking care of everything that's impacted in this vicinity. And they said, okay, well, that was good to know. They thought it was scaled. And then they said, well, we have a little bit more areas over here and over there in our marina that need to be dredged. We just want to pay for one dredging contractor to come in and do that. And so we just want you to expand your scope. And we said, we're not going to pay for that. That's a public gift of funds. But you, as the marina, can contract with anybody you want, including the city's contractor, and build yourselves, have it build separately for you, the marina, to pay for this additional scope of work. And so they said, oh, if you allow us to do that, happy, we're fine.
Okay.
So they're moving forward separately. We've given the green light to continue for our consultant to continue to move forward, and our consultant's going to be, they've reached out to our consultant. Our consultant's going to be invoicing Murphy's Landing separately.
Good. Thank you so much.
Yeah. And then the last two is what we just talked about. The stormwater revenue study was originally supposed to be completed earlier, and directly following that, the utility rate study was supposed to be completed by the end of this year. That's not going to happen. We're now moving that later for the stormwater revenue later into the end of 2021, and then the rate study will take that up with council probably at the very end of 2021 or early into 2022. So that was the tier 1. Not much has changed in tiers 2, 3, and 4. You can see them. I'm happy to open them up and bring them up if you want to look at them in particular. Okay.
I'm good. Are you fine with the other components, Bob and Councilmember Himes and Councilmember Wook?
Thank you. Yes.
The only one that, well, it's not even in there on tier 1. And this would be 2022, that, and that's my roundabout, Morgan, Burnham, Canterwood, here we go. That thing is, the sewer's backing up, let me put it that way. And we're getting close to what I call the pre-pandemic levels. We got a pass for about 1.5 years now on the backup on the hill there, coming down from Starbucks. Well, it's getting longer and longer and longer, okay? And we're not out of the pandemic yet. The school, by the way, I'm sure has a lot to do with it. But the other thing I'm finding out is the peak PM time is shifting. It's not 4 to 6 anymore. It's like 2:30 to 4:30 is where that place goes crazy. From what I've seen, I drive it quite a bit. I think at least we need a focused study on that intersection, particularly coming down the hill, called what are the delay times? What are the backups? How many vehicles are we actually putting through there by lane? Because we've got a dedicated right-hand turn lane right now on one of those. And the other one is a dedicated go on through the roundabout lane. But I think it's a big deal. I really do. It was growing teeth before the pandemic. It's getting those teeth back. And looking forward, boy, the sports complex and the village of Harbor Hill, when it happens, is just going to bury that thing. So I think we really need to at least get a study look at that thing, and also a better understanding of the metering concept, whether that's simulation modeling on that specific, under those specific conditions on that specific roundabout. We at least need to get that into what I call the conceptual stage. So that's
Well,
my thinking. I'd like to really push on that one.
I think that's a good discussion. I'm going to be talking about that project in particular more in depth at our October 19th study session. Maybe we can talk about it then.
Okay, yeah, this is more of a heads up. It's something I've just noticed over the last month and a half. It's really picked up big time.
Okay, we'll be ready to talk about it on the 19th.
Okay.
And
Okay, just bring your checkbook, that's all.
but Jeff, you were gonna, after the last Public Works Committee meeting, I thought we were gonna get a link to this, the one roundabout that's metered wherever it is in the state. And I kept looking for that link. Did you round that up?
Maybe I didn't send it. It's city of Kennewick, or Richland. Maybe I didn't send it. I apologize if I didn't. If I didn't, I will do it again before I leave today.
Okay.
Yeah, that'd be good. You can send it out to us, yeah.
You didn't get it, Bob, did you?
No, I
Or
didn't get it.
Councilmember Wu?
No.
Okay. Okay. Maureen, do we have any public comment?
No, we do not.
Okay, then the announcement of other upcoming meetings is the next meeting is scheduled for November 9th. And if there's nothing further,
Move to adjourn.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Nay. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Bye, thanks.
Thank you.